David, it's been a while since we've been in the BelTel Football studio, and a lot has happened over the festive period. I suppose the takeaway headline is that Larne are now an incredibly impressive 10 points clear with a game in hand on their nearest rivals, Coleraine. Last night, as we record here on Wednesday, they defeated Glentoran 4-1 at the Oval. Obviously Glentoran, because of Ryan Cooney's red card, spent a period of that game with 10 men, but nevertheless it's still an incredibly impressive result for Larne and an incredibly impressive run of form.
Larne have been simply outstanding, Keith. People talked about the game Larne would have against Coleraine, Glentoran and then Linfield, and they talked about how that would determine where the championship would go. Now, I'm not totally of that opinion, but I've got to say it certainly makes life a lot easier if you beat your nearest rivals. I was working at the game, Coleraine against Larne, and Larne were absolutely outstanding. And this was after Coleraine had played Linfield and beaten them quite convincingly. And yet on that particular evening, Larne were absolutely outstanding. Their work rate, their effort, their commitment, the quality of their football was something to behold. And I remember a line I used in commentary. There was one occasion which was actually off camera, and it was Tomas Cosgrove who, when Larne were already ahead, made this gut-busting run from his own 18-yard box down into the opponent's 18-yard box just to support the play and then getting back again. And that just screamed at me hunger and desire. So, for Larne to go to the Oval last night, and I appreciate Cooney was sent off, and I know there's been some debate already around some of the decisions that were made, but if you put that to an aside, for Larne to go to Glentoran to perform the way they did, to get the result that they did, is mightily impressive.
This means that Larne are now 10 points clear. They've got Linfield coming up on Friday night. Obviously, if they win that, they go 13 points clear, which is a huge lead. Is it already over? Is it now impossible for the likes of Coleraine or Glentoran and Linfield to catch Larne?
What I would say, Keith, is that this line will probably be brought out now. Oh, it's now Larne's to lose. And I know that when I was managing Linfield and we were in a good position in the league and that line was thrown at me, I used to get so angry and so annoyed, because it's not anybody's to lose, it's only yours to win. And all you need is a couple of ropey results, and then suddenly then there's a nervousness, and there's a maybe players are just not as sure. It's all about confidence, belief, and in particular momentum. If obviously Larne win against Linfield on Friday evening, that's a massive step forward. That's also big questions answered. What could they do, that being Larne, against Glentoran, against Coleraine, against Linfield? And that's highly impressive. I wouldn't say that their position would be unassailable, but I would say that it would be pretty much very difficult for the other teams to catch them, and it would need Larne to go right off the rails. At this moment in time, they're very focused. And let's be honest, Keith, in a number of occasions we have talked about Larne's progress. It's all been under the radar. There's been no singing, dancing, shouting or what we're going to do. It's been very clearly one game at a time, but they're certainly in a very, very strong position, and Gary Havern and his coaching staff and obviously his players deserve tremendous credit for what they've done thus far.
Well, over the festive period, Larne were fantastic. A team who haven't been quite at their best, it's fair to say, is Linfield. Obviously a bitter defeat on Boxing Day. Last night they had what's fair to say was a disappointing 0-0 draw with Carrick Rangers. Now the caveat to that is the fact that Josh Archer was red carded, and Linfield spent a long period of that game with 10 men. How do you reflect on Linfield's performance last night?
Well, if we go to the game last evening, Linfield were coming off the back of a league victory against Bangor where they won 6, and that sort of re-established, I would like to have thought, a little bit of confidence, and because they were coming off the back of 3 defeats. Last evening, it was always going to be difficult. Carrick, got thumped at home the last time out by Glentoran, 7. And there's no way Stephen Baxter was going to allow that to happen again. And certainly the Carrick players worked their socks off. Paul Heatley in particular was outstanding. I think we've got to cut to the chase, Keith, in terms of the sending off. I really don't understand why Josh Archer was sent off. For me, looking at it and looking at it and looking at it again, I felt that Ewan East would certainly have got across and made a tackle, or certainly made it difficult for Paul Heatley. So that was that talking point. There was also then the Adam Leckie situation, where he clashed with Ben Hall, and there was questions from both sides as to about that decision, and then there was also at the Linfield end. There was calls for a penalty. I don't go with that because the foul actually started outside of the box, and that's for me that wasn't a pen. It was a difficult night, and it was one of those nights where you're going to think this is a bit daft. And watching it, I thoroughly enjoyed it because it went back. It was old school, it was blood and thunder. And to be fair to to the referee, Tim Marshall, he let quite a bit go with regards to tackles and people getting about themselves. But Linfield, for me, in short, and I know unavailability of players, and I know injuries, it's all part and parcel of the game, but they have been hit big style. And last night, you're going to the same well to ask the same players to lift themselves again. Carrick, for me, were excellent. They did tremendously well, and you've got to give credit where credit's due. And it was on a night where, for me, over the piece, certainly a draw was a fair result because there wasn't an awful lot of chances created. I can't think of too many times when either goalkeeper was called into action. But I do think that the sending off did impact upon it. Of that, there is no doubt. And in my opinion, I don't think it was a sending off.
Big night on Friday night for both clubs. Linfield versus Larne at Windsor Park. This is a must-win for Linfield, really.
I don't like to label any game, Keith, as a must-win, but given what you've outlined, in contextualising our discussion now and seeing where Larne are at and the points that they have accumulated, if Linfield don't get all 3 points, then I think it would be fair to say then that the challenge is recalibrated, in that they're looking now at, well, how could we qualify for Europe, because the league maybe will be too far away from them.
The other game, of course, that took place on Tuesday night in the Sports Direct Premiership was a 2-2 draw between Ballymena United and Cliftonville. How have you rated Oran Kearney's start to life at Ballymena? It's been a few ups and downs already, which I suppose is typical of life at the Ballymena Showgrounds.
Having been there for 7 years and been Ballymena United's longest serving manager, I can certainly attest to the ups and downs and the highs and lows. I think what we've got to, first of all, recognise that Jim Irwin had invested well in terms of the players that and the squad that he had assembled. Oran has added to that. He will obviously be looking for consistency of performance. But for me, the result was almost secondary in that, that was the final game of Sean O'Neill, or Big Ogres, as we all, affectionately know him. We, being Brian McLaughlin, myself, brought Sean back to Ballymena during our tenure. And what an outstanding professional, what a man to have in your changing room, what a man to have on your side. I know that I think he's now looking ahead, for a role, a non-playing role somewhere. But the result, Cliftonville have been, they keep doing what Cliftonville do. They keep going forward. When I saw the goal that Joe Gormley scored to equalise, it was an absolute screamer. So I think the result on the night was what it should have been. There'll be fors and against and pluses and minuses, but Oran will go forward in his own meticulous, and thoughtful way. But for me, last night was not so much about the result. It was about the final game for Sean to play in the Irish League. And also I listened to an interview from him, and he didn't genuinely want to make it fuss. He genuinely didn't want it to be about him. He genuinely wanted to get the 3 points in the night. So if there's any consolation, at least he didn't finish on a losing side, and everyone was able to applaud and recognise the enormous contribution that he's made, not just to Ballymena United, not just to Crusaders, but to Dungannon Swifts as well. where he went, I think, on leaving Ballymena, and what he has given to Irish League football has been nothing short of absolutely outstanding.